Before today's topic, a quick disclaimer. The stories and data we share come from the states that we practice in and the experiences we personally had, which can differ greatly across our country and certainly the globe. This is not a professional advice show. So get comfy and let's discuss death.
Hello, and welcome to MortMic, a down-to-earth discussion on death and dying. I'm Jem.
And I am Red, and this week we are your interrogated death investigators.
This week, we thought we'd get down to some burning questions that we get all the time, and from an interesting source, our own families. Some of our family members have definitely made some family gatherings a little interesting by asking us questions about work, and we constantly get random shower thoughts like texts from our parents out of the blue, asking about death-related things, so it's time to finally answer them for all of you guys to hear as well. I'm sure you all have been wondering some of the same things.
So for this week's episode, I had asked my family for their questions, the common stuff that they've been thinking about, and I got a lot of texts, a lot of questions back. So what we're going over today is even cut down from what was sent to me. So we're not going to have time to answer each question super in depth. So we might kind of breeze past a few of them with just a quick answer. But there's a lot here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list right now, and I am very appreciative of Red's family. You guys are awesome. So we're going to try to, maybe we'll do like a lightning round for some of these, but we're going to try to do the best that we can.
So I'm starting off with questions from my aunt, ones that she sent me. So first of which being, what is an appropriate thing to say to someone who's had a loss?
This is a good one. I really like this one. I think we get it a lot just from people in general. Just to keep it brief, I always kind of say something that feels genuine to me, because they're always going to get the "I'm sorry for your loss," which I feel like is really ingenuine sometimes, or like, "my condolences for your loss," unless you really mean it. Like, it really gets old really fast and is really not genuine at all. So I usually say, like, I talk to them like I would talk to anyone. And then I usually say at the end, like, stay safe, or like take care, or something like this, because I mean that and I want them to. Yeah,
absolutely. I usually try to make it about the person that I'm talking to, that like how are you doing? Like, literally, like, legitimately, how are you doing? And like, is there anything I can do to help? Like, people aren't going to be reaching out for help. So it's always nice to offer, like, hey, like, do you want me to take you out to dinner? Like, anything I can do around the house for you? So usually making it about the person is really important.
Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. It's more about them and their grief than it is about like, oh, it's so sad that so-and-so died. It's like, well, yeah, it is sad.
Right, obviously.
All right, next.
What is the most common request for services and the most bizarre? Okay, so for this one, I feel like it depends on the like place that you're, like the demographic, because like some places it's like it might just be traditional Catholic funeral, mass, and burial, like that's what is going to be the most typical. Or in some other places it might be just cremation with memorial. But where I'm at currently, it's definitely going to be the former. We had a lot of Catholic services, a lot of traditional burials. And I had to, so the most bizarre request for a service I've ever gotten, I got a phone call, a researcher basically, that was calling around and asking questions. And this guy was like, oh, my dad's not doing so well, and he sounded young on the phone. He's like, my dad's not doing well, but he has this really weird thing he wants done. And I don't think any funeral homes that I've talked to so far are going to do it for us. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And he's like, my dad wants to be in a giant PVC pipe full of like silica gel and buried.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't even know where to start like to try to even do that for you.
Yeah, like where are you going to get those resources?
Right.
I'll just call up the embalming company and have them send me, I don't know, a ton of silica gel.
I need to know the story behind that one. There's got to be some weird thing in their family.
Yeah. This next one, though, could be a very interesting, bizarre option that someone could ask for. I hope that someone asks me this one day.
Yeah.
Red's aunt asks, is taxidermy an option for humans, I'm assuming?
Yes. So I know that like stuff circulates around online, some pictures of this where like in other countries that people are like embalmed and then put in positions that are like of life positions, like sitting at a table playing poker and stuff like that. But when it comes to like taxidermy, legit, like actually like having somebody as a coat rack in your house for forever, I don't even know if that's even a possibility. I mean, like legally, definitely not.
Yeah, at least in the US. There are some countries that, like you said, they will exhume the bodies of their relatives, and I think we posted about this on our Facebook, and they will have like a festival with these mummified bodies of their relatives and like change their clothes and blah blah blah. As I mean, technically embalming is kind of like taxidermy, guys. It's like extremely similar in a disturbing way, but yeah, I wouldn't say that people like have their aunt set up in their living room for like 40 years or whatever. That's a little creepy.
Right, because you got to think about taxidermy. It doesn't always look super great after a long time, and the same would be true for people, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah. What services do you want for yourself?
This is a good question. I always like this answering this because like as a funeral director doing so many different services, like what do you, after doing all of those things, what would you want for yourself? Personally, I mean, I know services are for the living. I want to be cremated. I want my remains to be scattered somewhere meaningful or multiple meaningful places. The services are up to my next of kin, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think the idea that I had is that, my mom is actually really sentimental. I would want her to just do whatever she wants. I would like to have my body either donated, organ donation if possible, or
definitely
donated to science if possible. Those things they're kind of hard to get into. So I would probably just want like a green burial myself if that couldn't happen. But service wise, I would want either my mom to decide, or if I end up dying after she dies, probably like my next of kin, or if not, just like, I don't know, throw me a box, throw me in the ground kind of thing. Like,
throw me in the trash.
I don't want any embalming though. That's the one thing I do not. No
embalming. Yeah,
I actually don't want an autopsy either, unless I'm like killed, because homicides, you have to do that. But I do not want anyone cutting me up like that. Nope.
Yeah, it's pretty invasive. Next question, is there an after-death market for recycling? And yes, there is. So in many different forms. So there's like metals from cremation, the hip replacements and plates and screws and stuff. Those are then picked up by a recycling business, basically, and recycled. And there's also like things like hearing aids and glasses and pacemakers that can't be used, obviously, by the deceased anymore. Hearing aids and glasses are donated to people that need them. And I know there's actually a program local to me that you can mail in pacemakers and they can have them like reutilized in third world countries and stuff, which I think is super cool.
That is really cool. I wonder if there's another meaning behind that. Did she mean like all that stuff, or is it like used caskets?
Oh, I wonder actually. I mean, there are rental caskets that can be used like time and time again until the wheels fall off of them, basically. So,
and that would just be for like your memorial service. You get a nice casket, and then someone else gets the same exact nice casket.
Yeah. Think of it like a hotel. I mean, everyone's sleeping in the same bed, so
it is a little more eco-friendly too, I guess.
Definitely. So that does it for my aunt's questions. Next are going to be questions from my stepmom. So her first question is for both of us. What training are we given to assist with counseling for families, if any?
Oh my. I mean, okay, so I was a death investigator and we're trained on the job exclusively. They just kind of wanted you to have like either a nurse or like funeral director, or even like former cops can be death investigators. So you have some, like, I was already kind of trained to deal with families, but being the first one to talk to a family that's just like, it's like they're your husband dies and then someone comes and talks to you immediately afterwards, like besides the cops, like that's me. So it is a little difficult to do that sometimes. I ended up being really good at it because I feel like I am very compassionate and empathetic, and I have like a soft-spoken voice, so people are like comfortable talking to me. But I really didn't get like, I didn't get like social work training or anything like this.
Right. And I mean, we had some psych courses in Mort school, but something that our professor like beat into our brains was that just a reminder, you guys are not licensed counselors. And so like I try to be pretty honest and forthcoming about that with families, where it's just like, yeah, like I have education on how grief works in your brain and especially with death. But like anything more than that, like besides just like asking them, what happened, that kind of stuff, and just listening, I would then have to, find, like, give them materials to be like, here, you can either use these self-help books, or we can, show you some grief groups, or actually get you in contact with a counselor. So definitely not something that I handle.
Yeah, with the investigations, we're definitely there for the information. We aren't really talking about feelings or anything like this. So I think that's where it gets a little bit easier, but I feel like you just have to have a knack for it as well.
Definitely. Next question is also for both of us. Is there any continued education for our professions?
Yeah, there is. For death investigators can get certified through the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigators, and there are continuing education credits to continue to be certified. And these are just in forms of like lectures or like online seminars, just like things like what to look for in like a burn victim, or like how to assess like time of death and stuff like that. Just like things to keep you up to date with like new scientific knowledge.
And there's definitely the same for funeral directors and embalmers. Actually, some states require it as part of your relicensure that you complete a certain amount of continued education credits. One of my licenses that I have to uphold, I have to do 18 every 2 years. So yeah, you can do webinars, you can do in-person stuff. There's of course like the National Funeral Directors Association conventions and stuff that you can go to and like sit in and on seminars. There's not like a whole lot changing for us. A lot of it's just like kind of general upkeep. But yeah, that would definitely be a place that we would find ourselves learning any new hot tips on cremation or whatever. She goes on to ask, are there any specific ethics that you are to follow as part of your license, like doctors and counselors have to, or is it more the laws specific to your states for funeral directors and medical examiners?
There isn't like it's not like a law, like HIPAA is, I'm assuming is what. Yeah, there's nothing like that.
Yeah, same.
But there's definitely state laws. I feel like funeral directing and like medical examiner stuff is definitely state by state. And the laws are there for you to read and to follow. Yeah,
I mean, there are some types of like law stuff in the legal code that's just like any like massive abuse of power kind of thing will cause you to lose your license. Like there's like a big list of these things will make you lose your license, and like being generally a bad funeral director is on there. So ethics definitely plays into that, I think.
Yeah.
That wraps it up for my stepmom's questions. So on to my mom's questions. She starts asking, could you embalm your parent or a close family member and handle all the aspects of their funeral?
I will start. I think about this a lot, actually. So I'm like, going to me, that would be like, would I do an autopsy on my parent or close family member? And I don't think that I would be able to. Because a lot of it for me is like dissociation. Like, I don't know this person, so cutting them open and like ripping out their intestines is fine for me. And, I always like have the utmost respect, and, I always try to do my best job. But if it was like my mom or like my partner on the table, I don't know. I'm very emotional. I wouldn't be able to do it, I don't think.
I talk a big game, but I think I also probably couldn't do like the actual embalming portion. I feel like I could definitely do like cosmetics and dressing, and like I definitely could handle the actual like arranging for the funeral type of thing. Because I've helped a little bit with some of my, like my grandparents and stuff like that with their funeral arrangements where I could. So I definitely think I could do that. But like the embalming, like anything that's like
Invasive.
Yeah, the invasive stuff would definitely be probably a hard no. Or it'd have to be, I'd have to like super disassociate, and I don't think I could do that.
Yeah, I would definitely read the investigative report and the autopsy report, like 100%. But I wouldn't be able to do it myself.
Agreed. Next question. Do you know how to dispose of a body without a trace with a laughing, crying, laughing emoji?
Crying, laughing emoji. Is your mom planning to do something in the near future? Does she have any enemies?
Hey, stepdad, has she been buying a lot of duct tape and, trash bags lately? I definitely think that cremation is going to be what you're looking for in this situation because, I mean, like, at least for my crematory, we don't have, like, cameras or anything. And if you were to be the crematory operator, knowing when people would be in and out and, like, be able to slip in and just cremate somebody real fast while no one's, like, around at night, like, yeah, I think that's going to be your method. But I feel like it's only really...
I feel like we need to put a disclaimer in. Red's literally telling people how to get away with murder right now.
In all fairness, though, it's only really a applicable thing if you know a crematory operator or are the crematory operator, because it's not like it's an easy thing to get into the crematory. So hopefully this. Oh God, are we? We're inspiring. We're inspiring crime.
And what I will say is that how you can dispose of a body with like a higher chance of it not being identified is also cremation. But when you're burning a body, disclaimer here as well, like, please don't murder anyone and burn their body. But I'm talking about this because it's really interesting to me, is that they have to be placed on a grate kind of thing, like above the ground, because the fat will melt off of them and put out the fire. So if you have them like laying in a wood pile, their fat's going to melt and put out the fire. But if they're up on like a grate or something, it won't, and it'll burn hotter and they will actually burn more, and there won't be as much to identify. But don't go do that.
Which is a lot of time, like when, people try to just like burn down a house, like do an arson murder or like try to dispose of somebody that way. Like a lot of the times the body isn't all the way burnt through, like, and it's still easy to figure out who they are via dental records or other things. So, so yeah, no arson. She goes on to ask, would you ever consider going back to school to become a pathologist assistant or medical examiner? And this is one specifically for me. I know that she knows that that's what I wanted to do. I've definitely thought about, me and Jem actually have talked a little bit about me potentially getting into other aspects, maybe doing death investigation myself. So, the future is a very bright and vivid place. So you never know. We'll see.
And, I was a funeral director trainee once too. And that's why I did go back to school, because I was like, I do like the medical side more. Like I want to do more. So I'm actually in school right now to become a pathologist assistant. But let me tell you, this is the last school I am ever doing in my entire life.
No more.
No more. I went back and forth a lot. I really, really, really did want to be a forensic medical examiner, but just the amount of time it takes to become one, and then the amount of time it takes like dedicating yourself to your job after that, I don't see that. I want a family life. I want, a fun life outside of work. I do have a lot of hobbies. So I was like, you know what, after this, I'm done. So how do you detach from the emotional side of death?
That's a tough one. Everyone does it a little differently. I like to just make sure I have a very fulfilling and full life outside of work. I'm pretty like hard set. Like when I walk through the doors and I get in my car and I leave, like everything that I just did for the day stays at work. Like I don't bring stuff home with me. I have things that I can do outside of work that, give me fulfillment and make me feel happy. So
yeah,
like it's definitely good to disconnect from your job.
That is really good. I actually think about death a lot outside of my job. I just like to, I don't know, I feel like it kind of keeps me in check, thinking about death all the time. Not all the time, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I kind of tend to dissociate a lot when I'm dealing with my job, just enough as to where like I don't, like if I get really sad about death every day, that's a problem for me. So I just kind of like to keep myself at a distance. And yes, it's sad, and yes, it's disturbing when certain things happen, but I can't put myself like in that space, or else I just won't be able to do my job. So I think, like, honestly, dissociation is what I do to kind of keep myself at a distance.
Would you ever open your own funeral home?
Yes, I would love to. This has been like a weird dream of mine. So obviously I'm not a licensed funeral director anymore, but you can still own a funeral home and not be a licensed funeral director. I've always loved the idea of owning my own business, and I have a lot of ideas, with the future of death care. I feel like it's going to be like a retirement passion project for me. It's always on the table for me.
I definitely have talked to Jem about this, like just like a, spark of the moment kind of thing. It's just like, if you open a funeral home, I better be your lead funeral director there. Like I'm about it. Like personally, I would never open my own where I'm the one that's in charge of everything, because I do not think that business people and funeral directors, like, just because you're a funeral director doesn't make you a business person. It doesn't make you good at running the business. However, I got lots of good ideas that could help it run smoother. So it would definitely be something that I would want to like work with somebody on, like co-own, where I do more of the funeral director front of house side of things, instead of making business decisions.
Yeah, you definitely need a good team behind you is definitely important.
All right. So next, that is concluding my mother's questions. Next, we're going on to my dad, and a big thanks to Dad for sending me 30 questions. And we had to whittle that down quite a bit here. So we're not talking at you guys for another hour just on this section alone. So now I know where I get all of my inquisitive nature from. So thank you, Dad.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I do really enjoy like all the things that, Red sometimes comes to me as like, oh, my dad said this, or, my dad was thinking this. I'm like, I think it's so cool. My parents don't really talk to me about death at all. Wait, but I have Red's dad. So.
I just texted him that I'm recording the questions, and he's like, don't be skipping any and getting lazy.
Wow, being called out.
Yeah, right. Damn, Dad.
We only have 50 minutes or maybe a little bit more.
So he starts off by asking, why did you get into mortuary science? The money, the job security, or the morbid curiosity? And it's definitely not the job security, and it's definitely not the money. I'm telling you right now. But I do like the science aspect a lot of mortuary science. I think it's fascinating, and it does really give me a meaning at the end of the day, that you just don't feel doing other jobs.
Yeah, I think that, death has always been a curiosity of mine, but I realized pretty quickly when I was younger that I could deal with death without it really affecting me personally. So I felt like it was something that I had to do in order to like feel fulfilled and like help people in that way. I feel like I was like, if I can do this and if I can deal with death, then I should do something about it.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much why I decided to do it.
You had a calling.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Not to be like cheesy and weird like that.
How many bodies have you embalmed?
I'm going to do the how many bodies have you autopsied? I don't know. Okay, so let me think. The place I used to work at, gosh, it used to be, I don't know. It's such a hard question because you really, really don't keep track at all. I would say probably maybe around 2,000, like me personally. But I've probably assisted over like 3,000 or 4,000, maybe more. I don't know. It's I
feel like my number's not as cool as yours. I didn't do any exact math or anything, but if I had to guess, it'd probably be just over like 1,000. Because like my first funeral home, like I was there for 2 years and I did mostly just embalmings. And the second funeral home, I was doing everything, so not so much. And now my current job, I'm just front of house, so I haven't done nearly as many embalmings as those past few jobs. So it kind of, I could, if I continued to embalm, I could definitely have reached your numbers, but I'm a little stunted now with my current position. His next question is this truly a family business? And funeral homes, it's all over the map now, because we have what's called Service Corp International, which is like this huge, like, mega company that buys up like the name basically for local like funeral homes and like operates their like higher up systems and all that stuff, but it still like looks like it's a family owned business because it has like the name on the sign, and you know all the funeral homes are different. It's not like it's like you're buying a, what's it called? It's not like you're buying a franchise or something where everything is going to look the same under one name. And you can tell easily based on the signage, actually, if it says dignity on the sign or has like a tree, that is how you know that it is a SCI firm. So it's, I would say it's probably half and half at this point, whether it's Service Corp International or like a legitimate family business, like still owned by like somebody in the family or adjacent to the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are still a lot of family businesses out there, and it's literally like, you know, my dad did it, my grandpa did it, you know, I'm doing it, or even like, you know, my aunt or uncle or something like this, or like a close family friend. But yeah, SCI is like, I feel like I always am reminded of the 6 Feet Under like plot line where it's like the big bad corporation is coming to buy up our family business and we need to be good business and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it's literally like that, which is kind of concerning, but you know, no one stopped it yet.
And I honestly think we're gonna see a lot more of the large conglomerate ones in the future, because like my current funeral home, like none of the kids want to take over the family business, and like we're kind of in this era where like no one, like our children don't really have a loyalty to like what our parents did. Like they kind of, you know, strike off and find their own way of life. So I feel like that's definitely going to become something we see more of. So something for both of us. What do you consider the worst way to die? Yeah, this is a rough one because we definitely know it.
Oh God. Well, God, I don't know. I just think they're all awful. But I would definitely say, I don't know. I think anything where you know that it's going to happen, like, you know, if you are in a car and, you know, stuck in a river and you're drowning and you can't get out, any sort of thing. This is really awful. So like, trigger warning for like suicide stuff, but I've seen a lot of cases and scenes where someone will like attempt suicide and then they'll be actively dying and they'll like regret it, and you can tell that they're trying to fix their mistake but they end up dying anyway. That's really just the worst and very awful. But yeah, I would say that's really not a good way to go.
I actually, that was one of my methods. It was like a botched suicide, like especially if you live, like some people are found and they're taken to the hospital and they still die anyway, like that. And honestly, I think like natural death isn't so cool, especially when some people are dying for years, like they have like beat cancer 6 times or anything like that. Like that's a lot to go through. And like constantly looking down the barrel at death, like that's a hard pass for me.
Yeah, I know. If you get someone that's so sick and they look so like cachexic and just like they just look awful, it's so sad sometimes.
It really is.
Okay, next question. What would you do for your parents' disposition? So
kind of harkening back to the question earlier, what would I do for myself? This is pretty much the same. I would like to cremate my parents and scatter. I don't know. I just think that's like really meaningful because it puts a lot of like the disposition in the person's hands instead of just like the funeral home's hands. Like I get to say goodbye to my parents, like at the top of a mountain, you know, Big Lebowski style. Like I get to be the person that puts them to their final place of rest. I think there's a lot of meaning in that.
I think I would like to honor their wishes. You know, I have talked to them about, you know, how I do not like traditional burials and why I think it's wasteful. And my parents are actually really eco-friendly kind of people. So I think that they would, you know, opt for something that's less impactful on the environment. But I know that my mom wants a closed casket ceremony with a black coffin and purple daisies. That's what she told me.
That's nice, actually.
Yeah.
It's
She's like,
very
I don't.
striking.
She was like, I don't want anyone looking at me.
Do not perceive me.
My dad, I don't remember. I think I asked him, but I don't think he answered me, or I don't remember what he said. But I would do what they want. I would assume that they would want some sort of like eco-friendly burial, though, because they're that kind of people.
Yeah. I mean, both of my parents already confided in me. I think cremation is the way to go. Like dad gets to go get scattered in Hawaii and mom gets to get scattered at Disney. So,
ooh, yeah. That's a good vacation.
Yeah, right. What is the longest time you've kept a body between when it came in and when it was buried, either pre or post embalming, or I guess in your case, Jem, like I guess how long of a stint do they have at the medical examiner's office?
Yeah, like we recently did an episode on indigent deaths. So if, a body isn't claimed, we have to keep the body for a certain amount of time. And due to paperwork and red tape, sometimes it takes a really long time to try to get these people, properly, buried or whatever. I think the longest one we ever had was it was close to a year. It was bad, but we have a freezer, so he was frozen in the freezer. And once the bodies are frozen, they're just in there. Like nothing super bad really happens. But yeah, I think the longest I ever had was just a man that no one knew or no one wanted to take care of, and he was in there for, I would say, at least 8 or 9 months. It was insane how long he was in there.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
We had somebody at our mortuary science college, similarly indigent, and we were waiting on the paperwork to pull through so we could actually do something with him. He was there for a year, if not a little bit over. And at that point, we called him Maggot Man. And I'm just gonna let your imagination fill in the blanks on that one.
Oh no!
He was more of a soup than a person.
Oh god, because you guys, there wasn't a freezer there. If I'm correct.
No, it was all just refrigeration.
Oh, no.
So yeah,
That's
that
awful.
was rough.
Yeah, you still decompose when you're in the fridge. So
just like anything you have in your fridge, fruit's still going bad. Meat's still going bad. So,
oh god, that's terrible.
At the funeral home, we had some people, that we would keep for a few months on end, especially being in any funeral home that you are at a place that has very cold winter months. And if you can't dig in the ground, you have to wait until it thaws to be able to bury somebody. So
yeah.
We've definitely held on to a few people for a few months to get through winter for that.
Next question. Can you bury a person legally on your property?
So this one I actually did have to do some research on because I've always wondered it myself and always talked about looking into it, but never had. So Lord, the legal code that I had to read through for this one, I got super burnt out trying to look into it.
Bless your heart. I hate reading laws. I hate it.
It's the worst. And so kind of what I was able to find, it falls into the state and local laws, of course, and also sometimes zoning code. For building and stuff, and property stuff. So some states have outright totally banned it, absolutely not, you cannot do this. Some local government hasn't restricted it, but they have a lot of hoops to jump through to do it. So if you live in suburbia, signs point to no, but if you're a farmland holder, perhaps.
Yeah, and in any case, you need to have a funeral director involved. They won't just let you take mom and bury her. If mom dies, you can't just bury her in the back farmland. Right. That's illegal. Yeah,
very illegal. Next question. Do you have to wear PPE to do transfers?
I would want to. I think the thing here is to what extent do you wear PPE? I don't want to take your answer, Red, but I know with funeral home pickups, if it's an old person on hospice, just wear gloves and be careful if there's any purge or anything like this. And I think that's goes also with you don't want to scare the family off or make them think that there's disease and death, because there's not really, especially for something like that. So I wouldn't wear the whole get up to go pick up someone from hospice.
Right, exactly. Obviously, recently we had to wear masks when we go into people's houses. But yeah, standard, just gloves traditionally. But we always do an ocular pat down of the situation first before we come in. And that's usually when we assess okay, how bad is this? Do we need to put on sleeve protectors? Do we need to put on booties? How, especially in the cases of houses that have lots of pest infestation types of things. Definitely want to have as much protection as possible so you're not taking anything back with you to the funeral home or, God forbid, your house.
Yeah, and the same goes for ME transfers. You just kind of assess the scene and obviously if it's a car crash, you're going to want more protection than someone who had a heart attack in their bed at home. I do think the worst thing though is what we most often wear the Tyvek suits for, which is the full body, head to toe, astronaut spaceman suits. is like the hoarder houses with like all of the bugs and stuff. I feel like that is the most often where those are used. It's not like the actual like crime scene that causes someone to wear that.
Yeah, right. It's just bugs, man. Like that's so much worse.
Oh, they're terrible.
So I love this next question. And I'm going to read it exactly as I got it from my dad.
I love this. Okay.
So like in Silence of the Lambs, where they put something under their nose so they don't smell the bodies, is that real or is it a movie thing?
That's so funny. It's definitely real coming from the stinky decomp medical examiner side of things. The something that they're putting under their nose is probably Vicks. That's really common to put Vicks under your nose. It is, though. I feel like this is true. It's not like a proven fact, but Vicks opens up your sinuses more. So I feel like more smell gets in, so it might make it worse. But what we used to do sometimes for like an extremely bad decomp body is we would put essential oil droplets inside of our masks. So it would be like eucalyptus or lavender, I think we had. And you put it in the mask. You don't put it on your face, but... yeah, I think people use Vicks a lot. That's like an old-timey thing.
Yeah, that was something that was on our list of things to buy for Mortuary Science College. We got Vicks for when we were going to start embalming lab. So I definitely put some Vicks under my nose before a few of our sessions. So that is definitely a thing. Are there exhaust fans in the embalming room? So OSHA has a lot to say about this. It's something like... it has to, of course, there has to be an exhaust system, and it has to do like something like 12 air exchanges per hour. Like the entire room has to have the air changed out at least 12 times an hour. And for good reason. Anybody who has spilled any type of formaldehyde or cavity fluid knows why it's important to be able to change out the air very frequently.
Autopsies, like embalming rooms and necropsy suites are the same. Like you have to have, it's OSHA regulated, so you can't operate as a lab if you're not complying. So, a certain number of air changes per hour. And also formaldehyde and formalin is just a terrible, terrible chemical that we still consistently use, and it does cause cancer. So you definitely don't want to be breathing that in. What is the most expensive item you recall someone being buried with?
So people bury all sorts of stuff with their loved ones. I've seen like jewelry that goes with them. Like I've asked, like, this is a diamond ring, right? And they're like, yeah, no, but it was hers, and we don't want it. We want her to have it. It was a symbol of her love for dad, so we want her to have that. Golf clubs, all sorts of stuff like that with an actual dollar amount is pretty high up there. I did have this one situation. Thank God I wasn't the person who caused it. A family heirloom bracelet. It was like some gold, like bracelet from Greece or something that was in the family for forever, was buried with a body, and we had to go do a disinterment, pay for the disinterment to retrieve it. Yeah, wow. It was like a whole thing. I'll tell the story at some point later on, like in the podcast, because it's like a whole thing, man.
Wow. Yeah, because they do teach us that you like should ask the family like if they want to keep the jewelry, before the burial happens, like.
Always.
Obviously things happen and mistakes are made, but
that's a big one. That's a career ender right there.
Oh God. Yeah, people come to autopsies with whatever they have on them. So I think the funniest thing is the little old ladies that come down from the hospital and they have like their entire life with them in their purse. Yeah. It's just like
the Mary
their
Poppins
little like
bag.
body, and then on top of them is this huge purse with all their stuff in it. It's like, oh, you needed that in the afterlife, I'm sure. Yeah. I had this lady when she had like an iPad, she had like her knitting stuff. I was like, aw.
Have you worked any cases a family sued the funeral home because they did a bad job on the body? So for me, definitely not personally, nothing that I was involved in, but it definitely happens. People sue for emotional distress all the time. It is hard to prove if it's like grief in general, though, or an actual like permanent impact on someone's psyche based on the funeral home's negligence. But a lot of the laws that exist today exist because they are cases that were won against funeral homes and is something that needed to be made into an actual code. So it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Do you actually dress the bodies or just cut and tuck the clothing? That's a really good question. I was like, I should be really proud of him for asking that.
I'll go with my experience. I've had limited experience, but it really depends. Some funeral homes do, some funeral homes do not. Like I've worked at funerals that have, and have cut and tucked, and I've worked at funerals that actually dress the bodies. And then sometimes you physically cannot dress the body, so it really just depends on like what's going on. But what do you think, Red?
So I've worked at funeral homes that do both. Like some funeral homes are like super like about it. Like they are like, we do not cut here. You know, you have to dress this person kind of funeral homes.
Yeah, it's like a moral code kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like it's lazy or something. And I'm like, I try to dress the person in the clothing that is brought for them without cutting, but I am not against cutting clothing, especially if somebody is of size or obviously like these clothes no longer fit this person. Like it would just look better tucked with the cut clothes. So I usually base it on the situation.
Yeah, people bring nice clothes, and maybe this person hasn't worn their nice clothes in a while, and maybe they're 100 pounds heavier. Like you aren't going to put them in that no matter how hard you try. So it definitely depends on the situation.
This one's a good one for you, Jem. How long does rigor last, or rigor mortis, and does it affect embalming and dressing?
So rigor mortis usually appears only like 2 to 4 hours after death is when it starts to develop. And then it can fully develop, which, you know, it means it reaches its peak, it's at its stiffest, about 6 to 12 hours after death. And obviously, this is just kind of like academic numbers. Like it varies greatly depending on like, you know, heat. Also, if you are doing like strenuous activity before you die, rigor can set in like right away because your muscles are all tensed up already. Like if you are like fighting an assailant or if you're like running or something like this. So it really depends, but it's, you know, the general rule is like 8 to 12 hours is when it's fully set, and then it starts to come off. And usually by 24 to 48 hours, you're not in rigor anymore. So it is kind of a quick process. You know, people always assume that if you're dead, you are in rigor immediately and you stay in rigor forever. And that is just not true.
Yeah, no. And it doesn't really affect embalming because we always break rigor at the beginning of like getting somebody embalmed, just so we have full range of motion and better positioning. Honestly, the thing that would affect dressing most is the embalming itself, because it sets the tissues in the position, like the hands over the stomach. So kind of like the 90 degree angle at the elbows, that makes it hard to dress somebody. So not the rigor.
Yeah, and the science of rigor mortis is so cool. I actually really like talking about it, but we'll talk about it in a different episode.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've always wanted to touch on with this, because I think it's really cool too.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with a case that should have been a closed casket, but the family wanted them shown anyway?
I've always wanted to, like I've always seen on TV, like it's like, oh, this person's head got cut in half, but the embalmer like reconstructed it. And they actually trained us in school to do like wax modeling, reconstructive like embalming, but I never ever got a chance to do that.
Yeah, like there's plenty of suicides in this situation that I would definitely like recommend not to have, you know, an open casket. And like usually people are pretty responsive when we say like don't, they won't. But there's still like families that like, yeah, we won't have an open casket for the service, but we want to see him. So like I remember there was a young boy that, you know, had shot himself with a shotgun and like really messed up his face bones. Wow. So like even though the skin wasn't really ruptured, like the bones were just shattered inside of him. Like
it looks awful too. It's not the person you knew in life. Exactly.
So like they saw him multiple times and they needed that, and like we did our best with it, but like I would not recommend that to any other families. Like I even did like a private family for a while once where the person looked so bad, but they wanted to see him, so we just had his like arm sticking out because like that was the only thing that wasn't like super messed up looking. Wow. So yeah, fortunately so far people are trust us as the professionals that we are.
And now that I'm remembering, we do actually get a lot of calls from families about seeing someone once they have come to the medical examiner's office. And because our office was located in a hospital, we did have a viewing room, and we did do that sometimes. But a lot of the times, especially with cases of decomp, the family would like insist on coming in to see this person that's been decomposed for like, you know, 2 or 3 weeks. And it's like, this is not first of all, it's probably not safe. Second of all, it's not the person that you remember. I know some medical examiner offices have to have a family member identify, even if they are like super decomposed, which is interesting. But we usually tried to steer families away from that just for like mental sake.
So question for Jim, has he ever had to go out on a scene where multiple people have died? So like car accident, multiple shooting, plane crash, anything like that?
I did a couple times, just like it's so rare. I remember actually when I wasn't an investigator, I was doing the body removal service. We had a multiple fatality car accident where these two guys were driving a car and they were high on drugs and they drove off like a cliff and they both died. And it's interesting because you're like getting the body and then you get it in the car and you're like, oh wait, there's another one.
Oh geez.
But there was a really it's a really well-known like private plane crash that happened locally to my area, and that was before I was involved in the death industry, but like everyone that I know was involved with it, and it's very much like a lot of planning, a lot of like keeping track of, you know, people and parts. We talked about like mass disasters in that way, but yeah, it's really rare, which is, you know, good, I guess.
Yeah.
Have you ever exhumed a body or seen one exhumed? Are they similar to mummified bodies?
So this one's really fun. I did get a chance one time to be present because usually they have to have usually you have to have like a funeral director as like a part of that when somebody gets exhumed. So I did get to see somebody once. We had exhumed the body and then the body was taken to the crematory to be cremated. So it was a metal casket. I don't remember how old the body was, but they had to like punch a hole in the casket so it drained all the water out. Because the vault was not like a lined vault, so all of the water just came through, you know, concrete's porous and all that. So after that drained, they cracked it open, took the lid off, like the lid parts off, like the head and foot lids off. And yeah, he's now looks so good, especially with water having gotten inside the casket, like definitely had started to decompose at a faster rate. So definitely not mummified. Like there were still some soft tissues left and like the clothes weren't like moth eaten or anything. But typically, I mean, in situations like this anyway, it's usually not long enough for any of these bodies to mummify completely. And it also depends on like the situation. Like, was it a gasketed casket? What kind of vault did they have? But especially with embalming, like that just kind of makes that last way longer. So we really never get to see a body that would be mummified just by time. And honestly, at that point, we'd probably just be seeing bones of somebody.
Yeah, there's so many variables. Like it depends on how long they've been dead. It depends on if they've been involved, like Red said, if they're exposed to water or anything like this. That's really interesting. I've always thought about like if a body is embalmed, like how long until they're starting to look like icky.
Real bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
It was is a smell I would never forget. Like it's a very different smell. Real nasty. 0 out of 10 would not recommend.
Would not recommend. Okay, and our final question. What is the worst body to attempt to restore for showing? Someone who's really old, skydiver whose parachute didn't open, waterlogged body.
So yeah, actually, I had just briefly mentioned this in a question not so long ago. The young kid who had used a shotgun to kill himself, like because the skin like was still molded around his skull, in like the skull bits were so broken up, like it was rough trying to shape him back into like a semblance of what a skull looked like. Like looking at pictures of him, like it wasn't even close to being that kid again. And like the amount of, because he was already starting to decompose too, so you don't have a good base to start on to do wax work. Like, I don't want to take all the credit for this. Like, I only assisted my other apprentice friend I was working with did a majority of the work, but it was just a nightmare. It was so bad.
Yeah, I like the little list that your dad gave us here. Someone who's really old, Skydivers, like I actually haven't seen a skydiver body that's parachute didn't open. That'd be really interesting to see. But I'm assuming they don't go like splat. They kind of stays all in. You know, I feel like they don't go splat, but I wouldn't know, so I don't know. Waterlogged bodies, I don't think you can really fix that if they're really, really, really bad. Like if they've been floating in the river for like a couple days.
Yeah, it's just the decomposition is so wild at that point. I mean, so my professor for my restorative arts class did show us some slides where somebody had been, massively decomposed after something like that, and like completely green at that point. And like the before and after of like what his student was able to do, like she looked pretty dang good. Like, I mean, she looked like a wax replica at that point of the person, but like still impressive.
It is really surprising what you can do with embalming. I will say, I think something that cannot be restored without like full wax modeling is like a burn victim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing is like without a good base, like if your canvas is bad, you can't get the paint to stick to it. If we don't have something good to work with on the base, like if we can't embalm the body fully so we have a nice like semi-hardened tissues to be able to start building on, there's no way. Like there's just no way to get that stuff to stick. Or like in situations where like the skull is in a million little pieces, like if you can't wire them back together to look like a skull, like obviously when you put the flesh back over the top, it's gonna look funny. It's not gonna look right. So there's a lot of cool things you can do, but it's just got to be the right conditions sometimes.
Yeah. Also, just at the right cost.
Yeah,
very,
exactly.
Very expensive.
Yeah, to get somebody to come in that's like good at doing reconstruction, like that's yeah, it's going to be a pretty penny to be able to do that.
Penny.
Yeah, it's a very sought after skill set. So definitely not usually in a lot of people's financial range.
And that is all our questions we had. I know Red's dad told us not to skip any, but we're running out of time, man. I very much enjoyed answering all of them, though. It was so much fun. And maybe we can do like another follow-up episode with some more questions. And if you guys like have any questions yourselves, or if this episode kind of like stirred something up in you and you want to ask us a bunch of stuff, if you want to send us like 50 questions in an email, like go ahead and do it. Like we are all ears for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was like one of the things that I was mostly looking forward to when we started doing this podcast, was answering listener questions. Like I've been trying to write down some of the questions that just my friends send me randomly, so I can, lump that together in an episode for us to answer more questions, because it would be something that I would like to do much more often, maybe once or twice a year, where we're actually able to like answer questions that you guys have. So I know you got a lot of them, because obviously you keep asking them to us in private. So.
Don't be ashamed. No question is a stupid question.
Absolutely. And that's going to be all this week on MortMic. We'd love to connect with you guys on our socials, so like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at MortMic Podcast. It would mean a lot to hear your feedback, so please tell us what you think in a comment and drop us a rating on whatever podcast hosting site that you use. If you have any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about, or those burning questions so we can do another episode like this, shoot us an email at mortmicpodcast@gmail.com.
I also want to give a huge thank you to our friend Marson for the use of his song titled Deputies of Death, which he produced just for our show. You can check out his Bandcamp at Marson, that's MARSON, music.bandcamp.com. Thanks, Marson.
And be sure to tune in the first Thursday of every month for some more casual discussions on death. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been MortMic.
Bye.
Bye.